Lunch and Learn. We are so grateful that you all are spending your afternoon with us to learn more about homelessness in the East Bay, things that are going on the ground, and real solutions that our organizations have put forward that could really help advance housing justice for everyone in the East Bay. Um, so we've been doing these lunch and learns for the past year, where we're trying to build up our membership capacity, to learn about new parts of the housing justice movement, issue areas that we care about, and also skill shares. So this is an extension of that effort, and we're really glad you're here with us today. So, without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to our executive director, Lindsay Haddix, to tell you a little bit more about EBHO and the work we do.
There we go. Thanks so much, Ronnie. It's so great to be with you all today, seeing some familiar faces and some new names, and I'm so glad that you're joining us for today's important Lunch and Learn discussion. So for those of you who are new to EBHO, East Bay Housing Organizations was originally founded 40 years ago. That's right, it's our 40th anniversary this year. And we were originally only working in the City of Oakland and known as the Oakland Housing Organizations. Our early campaigns included, a lot of the same things that we're working on today, as trying to make sure that everyone in the East Bay has access to safe, stable, affordable housing. We then expanded to cover Alameda County and then Contra Costa County after that. And today we're the leading affordable housing justice organization in the East Bay with over 400 individual and organizational members. We are a membership organization. Our mission is to mobilize the power and wisdom of our members, which include individual and organizational members, to produce, preserve, and protect affordable housing opportunities for low-income communities in the East Bay. This is known as the 3 Ps, of which we are a huge champion and advocate. So the first P in the 3 Ps is production. We need to build more affordable housing. And we do that through a number of different ways, by advocating for additional funding for below market rate subsidized housing, keeping an eye on jurisdictions' housing element progress, and making sure that public land is used for public good. Preservation, we want to preserve existing affordable housing, and we've done things like advocate for the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, again, protecting single room occupancy buildings, and working with community land trusts. We also know that it's important to protect tenants from displacement. I'm a renter myself, and we are huge advocates for just cause eviction and other anti-harassment ordinances, as well as advocating for rent stabilization. These beliefs of ours are on our website and in our strategic plan. We believe that housing is a human right, and that is very, salient given the conversation that we're going to have today about the existing and the history of homelessness in the East Bay. So housing is a human right. Everybody deserves access to shelter and housing. We also know that housing justice intersects with other types of social justice, including racial, economic, and disability justice. We believe that knowledge is a path to that justice, and that our collective action together as individuals, as organizations, and as community members in the East Bay will build power in order to accomplish our goals. We also know that more voices and more representation lead to better outcomes. We always try to make sure that our membership reflects the residents of the East Bay, particularly folks that are most directly impacted by housing justice policy and investment decisions. And we encourage you to consider, if you haven't already, becoming an EBHO member. We have a sliding scale for dues, both for individual and organizational members. We never want financial burden to prevent any individual or organization from becoming a part of our movement. So encourage you to check out our website. You can always reach out to Lavender Briscoe, our membership associate, who is joining us on the Zoom today if you have any questions. And of course, you can sign up for our listserv and continue to come to our events like today, which are free and open to the public. And with that, I believe I'm turning it over to Joey.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. And thanks, Ronnie, for your leadership in putting this Lunch and Learn together. I'm really happy to be able to be a part of it. We wanted to start the Lunch and Learn with providing a little bit of a snapshot, a grounding in what homelessness looks like in the East Bay. Often, that consists of mostly numbers and statistics about homelessness in the East Bay. It felt really important to us to start actually by grounding in some of the individual stories and the human experience of what homelessness can look like here in our communities. And then we will talk a little bit about some of the statistics as well, so that we can get a broader overview of what the situation is. But the first stories we have 3 stories that are from a San Francisco Chronicle series that was done a couple years back. They had been chronicling the experience of homelessness in San Francisco, and then did one series focused in Oakland. And the journalists shadowed 4 different people experiencing homelessness in Oakland for 5 months. And there's a much more in-depth look at their stories that you can see if you look that up through the San Francisco Chronicle. Here I've pulled a couple of them, and there are some video clips with direct testimony from those people. I'll just give a little background because the clips are really short and don't really tell necessarily the full story, but just provide a little bit of insight to that person's experience. So the first person that we're going to hear from is a man named Pumpkin Ambrose, who lost his home in around 2009. He had owned his own home and borrowed money, took out another mortgage to make repairs on the home, and then was in a car crash, and due to the disability from the car crash, couldn't pay off the loan, and ended up selling his home to a predatory actor that actually was later found to be acting criminally in the 2008 to 2010 foreclosure crisis. But even though they were found to have been acting criminally and tricking people basically into selling their homes, Pumpkin could not get his house back. So he had been living in an RV near Wood Street when this story was done. I would note that encampment actually has been cleared since the time this story was written. So I actually don't know what his status is now, but that's a little background, and let's hear from him directly.
I got here because I lost my property in around the corner on Willow and 13th Street back in 05, 06, somewhere up in there. And it's been a rocky road ever since. I ended up down here because I know the area, and if by me having to sleep in my car, I felt more comfortable down here opposed to anywhere, because I was known from being around here all my life, being active with the community. I just got a lot of ties in the area, and I wouldn't really want to live nowhere else.
Be happening?
In Oakland, I should say.
Thanks, Lindsay. That played well for me. I just want to check in because were people able to hear it and see it? I can see folks if you put a thumbs up or something. Okay, great. The next story from this series, we have Derek Sue. Derek had a heart attack in 2007, which led to an early retirement, and then lost more savings in the Great Recession. So he was living with his father for a time, and his father died without a will, and due to some probate issues, Derek was unable to keep the house. And this isn't something we're going to go very in depth with today, but it's part of something called an inheritance gap, where people with higher incomes and white people in America have a much easier time inheriting property and staying in family homes than people of color and people with lower incomes. So that was how Derek Sue ended up losing his home. And let's hear from him directly.
What caused me to become homeless back in 2008 was the collapse of the real estate market. I already knew I was going to lose my home, but then trying to find a home during a recession and also a huge downturn in available housing units, because now all of a sudden apartments became extremely expensive and I had no income. March 2014 is when I came out here officially and have been here since. It's been very difficult out here.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. The last person we have is Delbra Taylor, who worked for the post office for 15 years, had saved up, was ready for retirement, and bought a mobile home in Hayward, and was evicted shortly after moving in. Even though she owned her unit, she doesn't own the land that the unit is on. And apparently there were some complications with the park fees to rent the land that she was living on, and was evicted and lived in her car for a long time, and eventually found her way into a FEMA provided trailer.
I'll never forget the day. And matter of fact, it was the day my grandfather passed. I was getting an eviction. It's been hard. And I would tell anybody, don't take life for granted, because everything is not promised. No matter what you do right, you still can end up looking like you did wrong. And because of that, I became homeless. I'm proud of who I am. I know I have been through struggles, but I'm not gonna let my struggle keep me down. So I just tell people, never give up. Never give up hope. I'll never forget the day.
The only thing I want to say before we move on from these stories is, I think we have a lot of images about what causes homelessness, what causes people to lose their homes. And there are a lot of narratives about drug use and behavioral health issues, mental health issues, joblessness. But like Delbra said, you can be somebody who and still end up without a home. All of three of the people that we just heard from, were working people, had good jobs, and were, living within the bounds of the law when they became unhoused. There's another story on the Chronicle series that does deal with somebody who is dealing with substance abuse issues, and I don't want to discount that as something that does impact a lot of people, but it's really a dominant narrative in a way that maybe doesn't actually represent the full width of people who experience homelessness. So now we can zoom out a little bit and talk about some of the broader patterns in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. These first numbers are from Alameda County's 2024 point in time count. So every 2 years, counties across the United States do a survey of people experiencing homelessness on a given night. They're not incredibly accurate. There are some methodological issues, but they are about as accurate numbers as we get when it comes to trying to count how many people experience homelessness. And they count both people living in temporary or emergency shelters and people living on the street or in tents and cars. So on any given night in Alameda County, we have close to 9,500 people experiencing homelessness. This count is actually down 3% since 2022. But then a number that is increasing is the number of people who are experiencing chronic homelessness. So often, we say that we want homelessness to be a brief, rare, and one-time occurrence. People experiencing chronic homelessness are people for whom homelessness is none of those things. Either they've been homeless for an extended period of time, or they continue to cycle through experiences of homelessness. So that is certainly an issue that we need to address in our community, although it's a positive thing that the overall number of people experiencing homelessness is down somewhat. The other thing we're seeing is that the number of people in emergency shelters is increasing, and the number of people living on streets and in the car are decreasing. So that is probably a positive trend. It's almost certainly a positive trend. I know there are advocates who take some issue with the state of our shelter system, but in general, that's the way things are moving right now. And we can go to the next slide, which just shows, again, a little more detailed, the number of folks who are sheltered versus unsheltered. So it's still a smaller proportion of people who are in emergency shelters, but that number, that share, is growing. And then we can take a look at Contra Costa County. And in Contra Costa County, there's a smaller number of people who are experiencing homelessness. It's a smaller county as well, just under 3,000, but that number is growing. And it's a much greater share of the folks experiencing homelessness in Contra Costa County that are experiencing chronic homelessness. So that's more than half of the folks experiencing homelessness in Contra Costa County. So that's certainly something that needs to be addressed. And if we take a look at the next slide, we'll see that the population experiencing homelessness in Contra Costa County, they're not closing that gap as much between folks experiencing sheltered versus unsheltered homelessness. Those rates are increasing similarly, as opposed to in Contra Costa County, where there's, as opposed to in Alameda County, where there's a shift towards folks having some emergency shelter. So we also want to talk about the demographics of who experiences homelessness. These numbers are put together by the Bay Area Equity Atlas, who do a really good job tracking some of these things. These numbers are a little older. They're from 2022. And I see Irma saying in Contra Costa, it's a large population going through homelessness. It is absolutely a large population. I don't want to discount that at all. It's smaller than Alameda County, but it's close to 3,000 people, and that is a huge number of people. But these demographic numbers, we can see that it's incredibly racially skewed who experiences homelessness in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. So in Alameda County, Black folks make up 10% of the overall population, but 39% of the population of people experiencing homelessness. So that is a really damning number. It's a little more difficult to see, but the number of indigenous people experiencing homelessness is also much greater than their proportion in the overall population. So we can see that these experiences are not distributed evenly by race. And the next slide, we can see it's similar in Contra Costa County, although the numbers are slightly different. But again, the proportions are really outrageous. I think we can go to the next section then. The other thing, sorry. Yeah, I want to just talk a little bit about where people are from. We definitely hear a lot of narratives about people moving to the area to be homeless, and that's something we really have to dispel. I think that narrative has been calming down a little bit recently, but we really need to be grounded in the fact that our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness were our neighbors before they were experiencing homelessness as well. In a moral sense, it doesn't matter really where somebody comes from, but we have to dispel this rumor that people are moving to California to become homeless or shortly after becoming homeless. So 90% of people in California who experience homelessness lost their homes in California, and 75% live in the same county where they lost their homes. Some numbers that are closer to home in Alameda County, close to 70% of folks experiencing homelessness have lived in our county for at least 10 years. And it's fewer than 10% who have lived here for less than 1 year or a brief period of time. So that's something we can continue to make sure we know that these are our neighbors and community members and have been for a long time. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about where people tend to come from shortly before they find themselves without a house or a place to stay. And I want to emphasize that most of the reasons people end up experiencing homelessness are economic reasons, meaning they can't afford to pay rent or can't find an affordable place to live. So mostly we're looking at folks whose median income was $960. And I'm sorry, just to be clear, these are California-wide numbers because we don't have this information at a Bay Area specific level. Close to 20% are transitioning out of the criminal legal system. So that is another area we really have to look at very closely, is how do we support people who are transitioning out of that system. But then the other 80% of people are, coming from living in a home, and either they are the primary lease or mortgage holder, or often close to 50% of the time, they're in a somewhat unstable living situation where they are their name is not on a lease or mortgage. And the primary reason that people in that category list for losing their homes are social reasons, meaning they were kicked out of that place by the person they were living with, or felt they could no longer ask for support from that person, and so moved out on their own. But that's related to the economic reasons that people who are the leaseholders move out of their homes, because to end up in that unstable subtenant situation in the first place of not having your name on a formal lease or mortgage, that's typically economic factors that lead you to that situation as well, in that you couldn't find an affordable place to live somewhere else. And again, addressing the narratives about mental health and substance abuse issues. These are real issues that people experiencing homelessness are facing. But this 2023 study across California showed that more often homelessness was a cause of those issues than a result of it. So in other words, more often people find themselves experiencing homelessness and end up dealing with mental health issues and substance abuse issues after that than beforehand. So they are intertwined, but I think we want to move away from the narrative that there's just one cause of homelessness, and it has to do with drug use and mental health. So that's our snapshot, and I will pass things off to our next speaker.
All right. So we are going to zoom out briefly to talk about homelessness at the federal level and things that we are seeing along with Bay Area responses. Next slide, please. So I know a lot of us probably heard about the Grants Pass decision, but this is just going to be a little bit of an overview in case for folks that aren't aware or don't know some of the details. So Grants Pass v. Johnson was a court case originally filed in 2018 that was set to determine if it was cruel and unusual punishment to arrest and ticket people for sleeping outside when they have nowhere safe to go. So the case started in Grants Pass, Oregon, when the city began issuing tickets to people sleeping in public when there were not enough safe, accessible shelter beds. So the lower court ruled that punishing people for doing something they cannot help is cruel and unusual punishment. But the decision was appealed to the Supreme Court. Next slide, please. And then the ruling came down this past June in a 6-3 decision. I know a lot of you already know that the Supreme Court, as it currently is full of a bunch of Trump appointees, very conservative. So their holding in a 6-3 decision was that the Grants Pass policies does not constitute cruel and unusual punishment. And this actually, the ruling overturned a previous decision in Martin v. Boise, which ruled that cities cannot punish unhoused people for violating anti-camping policies when there are no alternative beds. So this ruling just kind of changed the game in a sense. There were already inklings that the Supreme Court was going to rule in this direction, and there are a number of orgs that were trying to come out in front of it, but before the ruling came down in June. But what I think is interesting, next slide, please, is a dissenting opinion by Justice Sotomayor, is more in line with a human rights kind of philosophy and in regards to homelessness and housing. Um, so um, the overall point is that what she was saying, the Supreme Court is saying you either have to stay awake or be arrested. And she took a serious issue with that message and saying that sleep is a biological necessity, not a crime. For some people, sleeping outside is their only option. The city of grants pass jails and fines those people for sleeping anywhere in public at any time, including in their cars, if they use as little as a blanket to keep warm or a rolled up shirt as a pillow. For people with no access to shelter, that punishes them for being homeless. That is unconscionable and unconstitutional. So she was joined in this dissenting opinion by Elena Kagan and Ketanji Jackson. The three of them are the more progressive justices on the court. And what I think is interesting and what I've been trying to tell folks is that when it comes to the Supreme Court, sometimes the dissenting opinions have a way of showing up again years down the line, even if a ruling goes one way at one certain point in time. So the impact of the ruling was probably not a surprise to many of us. Is that the Supreme Court has given cities permission across the US to punish people who are forced to sleep outside even when they have no other safe option. This type of ruling does nothing to end homelessness and essentially just punishes people for existing in public simply because they have no place to go. Studies and experience show that criminalizing homelessness only leads to more homelessness. Prohibiting acts of human survival, such as sleeping outside, is a waste of taxpayer dollars and actually makes it harder for people to connect to housing. Next slide, please. So how are we seeing this in California? So Governor Newsom's executive order explicitly states this executive order directs state agencies to move urgently to address dangerous encampments while supporting and assisting the individuals living in them, and provides guidance for cities and counties to do the same. So California and counties in California have reported about 71,000 emergency shelter and transitional housing beds last year. The state would need more than twice the number to accommodate the more than 181 homeless folks who currently live in California. So there actually aren't enough beds to even accommodate this executive order. And the problem is compounded when encampments are on state property because agencies such as state parks don't run homeless shelters. Next slide, please. So then we get into this conversation about sweeps. So sometimes I know we'll use the phrase clearing, but it's also known as sweeps. And sweeps is a controversial strategy for dealing with homelessness. Or organizations who work with unhoused communities say sweeps sever connections between residents and caseworkers, which ultimately make it harder for them to get housing. And the testimony that I wanted to lift up is from an unhoused neighbor in Oakland, who was sharing with a reporter about what it actually feels like to have the police come, have the parks come and evict them. So I'm just gonna share what they shared with the news. That beeping sound of an excavator or bulldozer. That sound is so triggering. That stuff is of our nightmares. You start trying to prioritize what you need. You try to pull yourself together and figure out what's important. And the next time you're doing this, there's a good chance the police officers are going to harass or antagonize you. It's like you're being told you're a bad person for existing, that you're a criminal for existing. I think as we have these conversations about the best solutions for homelessness, we need to keep the humanity of the folks who are unhoused. Next slide, please. And from what we've discovered, which should be of no surprise, is that the responses from both housing and homelessness organizations across the board, both in California and federally, have been that the solution to homelessness is to create safe, dignified, and affordable housing for everyone. And now I'm going to turn it over to some of our community folks, to Talia Husbands Hankin, who's going to talk about her organization.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Talia Husbands Hankin. My nickname is Boots because I'm always wearing a pair of cowgirl boots. And I am the founder of Love and Justice in the Streets, which is a grassroots organization based in Oakland. I started out doing this work by building relationships with unhoused community members who are living in my neighborhood and asking people what they needed and how I could support them. I myself am low income and disabled, and I didn't have a lot of funds available to meet people's needs. So I started asking other housed people in my community to participate and to share their access to resources so that we could meet the needs of my neighbors. So Love and Justice in the Streets has grown, and we do our work in several ways. One is the redistribution of wealth and resources by inviting housed people and people who have access to resources to redistribute that wealth and resource so that we can directly materially support people who are forced to live outside. And that includes providing things like tents and blankets, medicine, food, clothing, shoes, and other survival supplies. Another way that we do our work is through sweeps accompaniment, documenting, bearing witness, and physically assisting people who are being forced to move, and connecting and also advocating to connect people to shelter options. Another way we do our work is through political advocacy with housed and unhoused people collaborating to push for policies that uplift human rights and center the experiences and solutions of unhoused and formerly unhoused people. And we also amplify these issues in the media. We're a small network of volunteers, and 100% of what we raise goes directly to providing resources and material support to unhoused people in Oakland. And we also support folks in Berkeley sometimes and other Bay Area locations, but it's mostly focused on Oakland. So a little bit more about what's happening in Oakland. Right now, there are thousands of people who are forced to live outside without access to basic human rights. And it's really important that we talk about this in a human rights context because people have no access to water, to electricity, to sanitation, and to shelter. And this is an emergency. Ronnie just spoke about the Grants Pass case at the Supreme Court. And this, along with other dynamics, has created a really a shift in our society and in our local community to an anti-poor and anti-homeless climate, including the escalation of sweeps from both Governor Newsom's executive order and here in Oakland, Mayor Sheng Tao recently put out her own executive order calling for more sweeps across Oakland. So folks who are forced to live outside are being swept by multiple agencies. People are being swept by BART, by Caltrans, by the City of Oakland, by the railroad company. So no matter where you go, you're at risk. The City of Oakland carries out sweeps 4 to 5 days every week, and they are currently sweeping people right now as we speak. I have witnessed several hundred sweeps, and I have seen firsthand the extreme harm and trauma that sweeps cause. Over the past few months, the city of Oakland has escalated the targeting of vehicle dwellers, impounding people's RVs and cars. Just this week, an elder lost his car and was left with no shelter and nothing the day before the storm. All of the safe RV sites in Oakland are full. So people who are living in vehicles and who are being swept are being offered no option, except for to abandon their vehicles, their dwelling, and go into a shelter that's like a congregate shelter. Last week, a community of about 15 disabled, mostly elders, lost all their shelter and belongings. And this same group of people is now scheduled to be swept again tomorrow. Sweeps are an extreme waste of public funds, pushing people from one sidewalk to another, trashing people's belongings that they depend on for survival, and leaving people in more unsafe conditions. Love and Justice in the Streets, along with many other organizations, urges the city of Oakland and Caltrans to immediately stop the sweeps and redirect these public funds into real solutions. We invite individuals and other organizations to join us in calling on government leaders to immediately utilize public land for public good, opening the many parcels of city, county, and state land that are currently sitting empty as locations for vehicle dwellers and self-governed and co-governed communities with wraparound services. The massive amount of funds being directed to sweeps could also be used to purchase hotels for long-term shelter options. Wood Street Commons, a grassroots organization that we partner closely with, is a group of unhoused and recently housed individuals from the Wood Street encampment that has been demolished, that we heard about a little bit earlier from Pumpkin. And folks from this community are organizing and are working for solutions, and they have come up with some excellent solutions that are that we just need to support, including a long-term solution of using the 22 acres of Oakland-owned Northgate parcel that's sitting empty to create permanent long-term housing with wraparound services and an education campus. It's a beautiful vision. They've been working with an architect, Mike Piatek, who's very well respected in this community. And I really encourage people to follow and to learn about Wood Street Commons and the work that they are doing. I think it's really important that we are led by people who are directly impacted, and they are doing beautiful work in our community. They go out every week and do outreach at encampments, as well as working on visions for both immediate solutions and these longer term solutions. You can find them at woodstreetcommons.org or on Instagram. And in addition to advocating for an end to sweeps, there are immediate actions that each of us can take. Especially in cold and rainy weather, we encourage housed people to go out and check on your unhoused neighbors. Bring hot coffee, bring burritos, bring socks, bring beanie hats, bring ponchos and tarps. Donate to organizations who are doing this work on a daily basis. At this political moment, it is more critical than ever to build relationships with each other, including for housed community members to build relationships with our unhoused neighbors so that we can create more grassroots networks of care. Please join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to invite Ken Kirky from All Home to talk about the work that All Home is doing regionally, including in the East Bay.
Thank you, Lindsay. Can everyone hear me? I'm Ken Kirky, Chief Partnerships Officer with All Home. Really happy to be here with all of you this afternoon. I'll come off, get on the video. I've really enjoyed the presentations thus far. Joey's statistics were spot on with a lot of what we see. Talia, your remarks as well. Ronnie, the information on the grants pass, also super, super helpful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about All Home, who we are, what we do, and what we do in partnership. All Home was launched in 2020. We're coming up on our 5th anniversary. We launched just before the COVID pandemic. And we learned very early on that because of really the 2 reasons we were established, we were going to need a lot of partnerships. So we were established to do 2 things. One, to establish an effective homelessness response system in the Bay Area that meets people where they are in a humane way, in a way that treats people with dignity and respect, and to get to the root causes of homelessness that really put a very large percentage of people in the Bay Area who have extremely low incomes at risk. We have roughly 1 million people living with extremely low incomes in this very expensive place and who really lack adequate housing and economic security. So a lot of our work is focused on the root causes as well. Next slide, please. One of the things we did early on, recognizing the magnitude of what we were trying to accomplish and that a small but mighty nonprofit could definitely not do it on our own, was to create something called the Regional Impact Council, which brought together a range of people with lived experience, subject matter experts, elected officials who are on board with the approach and the belief that a region with as much wealth as the Bay Area should not have the dynamics we have on our streets and the suffering that we all see and too many people experience. And this group, and happy to say that Lindsay Haddix is one of the members, has worked on a couple of big initiatives. One of them is something called the Regional Action Plan that was first launched in 2021 and then updated last year. And what the Regional Action Plan calls for is, through a mix of concurrent solutions, jurisdictions creating an effective homelessness response system in the region, which means getting to scale, which is a challenge given resources, but it also means not focusing on one solution, but really trying to meet people wherever they are. It outlines targeted homelessness prevention. So this is really meeting people before they become unhoused. If they have a hiccup in life that it makes it impossible for them to pay their rent for a month, targeted homelessness prevention provides that person or that household with the support they need to not fall down into homelessness. I'll note, Joey, in your presentation, you spoke about the relationship of substance abuse and homelessness, and what you described is exactly what we see. Many people in the region who have become unhoused, they haven't had substance abuse issues. They haven't had extreme mental health issues. The experience of some of what Talia just described brings people to that place. And so we really work to try to prevent homelessness in the first place. We also support interim housing, which is a specific type of non-congregate shelter that gives people privacy, provides services in a building or a setting that is humane and allows people to stabilize from times on the street and times outdoors on the path to whatever permanent housing solution is most appropriate for them. That might, in some cases, just be a voucher for an apartment. That may be permanent supportive housing for those that need it. Next slide, please. So one of the things we've done is to really try to work directly with jurisdictions, and we've heard what some jurisdictions are doing or not doing. We are working currently with 6 of the 9 Bay Area counties and a number of cities. We've assembled a small technical assistance team. We do this work pro bono, And we work with jurisdictions around really looking at what is the mix of those concurrent solutions that the jurisdiction needs to bring down homelessness and to really meet the needs of people who are either at risk of homelessness or currently unhoused. We look at the current array of funding and how money is being spent currently and what additional funding might be needed to change the dynamic. And unfortunately, at this point in time, in really all of the counties and cities in the region, there is a need for additional resources. So how money is expended becomes really important. We work across departments to try to get different departments and parts of a given government to coordinate what they're doing. I mentioned our targeted homelessness prevention work, and we also have an emerging leaders program, which identifies people with lived experience, supports them through training, and brings them into not only the homelessness response system, such as being on the COC committee in a given community, but also preparing people for elected office in some cases. Next slide, please. So with a quick look at the East Bay, we're currently working with Contra Costa County. Contra Costa was the first county in the region to endorse the regional action plan. We are working with them currently on the array of funding, their current systems. They have assembled a strategic planning group that involves the department heads of every department in the county because homelessness touches every part of the county. They are about to embark upon their strategic plan. That will have a public component. That will be an opportunity for people to become involved. They are advancing a targeted homelessness prevention pilot, and they have a cohort of emerging leaders that are now informing the process in the county. Next slide, please. In Alameda County, as many of you know, homelessness has really increased over the last decade. As Joey described, there has been some step down in terms of unsheltered homelessness, but the gentleman who described his situation of becoming unhoused and staying in his neighborhood, we have seen that again and again and again. We've been encouraged in the past year. There's real leadership at the county level now. Working with county staff, the county's looking at updating its Home Together plan, trying to accelerate its implementation. There's potential resources coming on board this coming year, which should be really helpful. And we're working closely with the City of Oakland as well. Oakland was actually one of the first cities to have a targeted homelessness prevention program. They are looking at how they spend their resources across concurrent solutions. And we are really hopeful that in 2025, there can be some successes and some progress in Oakland as well. And I think there will be opportunities for people to step in and support those efforts. Lastly, I'll say that since part of the focus of today is on sweeps, completely agree. We completely agree. Homelessness sweeps don't work. They create a lot of pain. They create a lot of trauma. They cost money, and they don't really achieve anything. In the Bay Area, we do not have an effective homelessness response system yet to scale. And that is what we really need to work toward if we want to help our neighbors who are outside. Thank you.
All right, so actually we're gonna do, before we do the call to action, we're gonna do the Q&A. So I know some folks have been busy in the chat, which is great. But we're gonna try and get through some of the questions that have already been posed. So one of them was posed by New. So this person said there is a Black woman who was taking up residence at the bus stop outside of Oakland, VA. I stopped to talk to her and asked if she liked some assistance. I encouraged her to accept help as she was all wet with a wet blanket wrapped around her. I'm concerned for her. What effective help can I direct her to or send her to? The VA police there have reached out to help and provide her with assistance when asked, but she has not been receptive of it yet. She told me she needed a coat, but that is not enough unless it is waterproof. I warned her that it was going to be really cold and that the rain is going to last several days. I think she may be persuadable. So what would be effective help? Hmm.
I can jump in. I
Yeah.
think the way that Love and Justice in the Streets that we operate is that we take the lead from people who are living outside, and so asking her what she needs and then trying to respond with whatever resources we can come up with. Obviously, we're a small volunteer organization, so I don't have housing to offer someone, but I do have a phone that works, and so the ability to call 211 and see if there's open shelter beds if she is interested in a shelter bed. If she is interested in material support and needs something like a coat or a tent or a tarp, that's also something that we can provide. So you can email Love and Justice if you'd like to get some help connecting her to material resources, or we also just encourage people to take that on themselves if you have the capacity to do that. She's located by the VA, which is right near shelter options. So that is also, if she's interested, it's literally across the street. There's a shelter from right there. So that's something else. 211 is how to get in. Even if you're an agency, people have to call 211 to find out what the beds are available for the day, and it's usually just congregate shelter costs for the night that are available in Oakland.
Thank you, Talia. Let's take a question, a hand raise, and then we'll go back to one of the chat questions. I saw Betsy Morris first. So Betsy, will you go ahead? Is your question the one in the chat?
Thank you. I just put it into chat.
Okay.
Why? And it's two questions. One is asking who convenes the continuum of care group. I get confused by 3 or 4 different entities moving around. But my main question, as someone who's been trying to understand and study this system, why is there no independent component, ombudsman office, or some way we as consumers or taxpayers or something could really strengthen the continuum of care? Because I mostly with East Bay Gray Panthers see the failings. So I know they've helped many people, but it just does not seem to be able to, groups receiving these funding don't seem to be transparent about how they're improving their work when they have fails. I hate to be just critical, but anyway, my question is, can we get an independent ombudsman of people who are using their services to actually respond to the complaints that people make, not to just be individual about it, but to actually improve this into an effective emergency response system of humane people? Thanks. That was way too long. I was addressing Ken Kirky or anyone who can tell me about the continuum of care.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. I can try to jump in. I mean, I think the short answer is that our homelessness response system across the region is so far from, in many respects, from what you described and what it should be. I'm aware that in the city and county of San Francisco, which relatively speaking has a lot of resources, and a lot
Forgive me, Ken.
Yep.
We're in Alameda County, Contra Costa, so I'm just talking about the East Bay.
Yeah, I mean,
Our continuum of care.
so the COCs in both counties operate somewhat differently. I think both have made, in both counties, there's been a significant effort to bring people with lived experience into the COC framework. But as far as an ombudsman, I think the counties, they aren't there yet. It's a good place for them to go, and it's totally appropriate, but the systems are not developed in the way that they need to be yet, where they have, to my knowledge, anything that would quite approach that. So I guess I would say it's a really good idea, probably long overdue, but I don't think it exists at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Betsy. I see James Van, you have your hand raised.
Yes, Betsy, for the Continuum of Care program, contact everyonehome.org. They have a contract with HUD to oversee the Continuum of Care, and they're now, I think, in the process of accepting responses to RFPs to actually be granted agencies under the Continuum of Care. So look up everyonehome.org. And I was originally just going to ask Talia if she wanted to say something about the City of Oakland's macro program, because that was specifically put together to outreach to people who are on the streets. So if Talia wants to say something about that, that might help to answer the question that was originally posed. Thank you.
Hi, James. Thank you. That's perfect. I was just thinking about that. I should have mentioned that. So the City of Oakland now has a program that we fought hard to get funded called Macro, which is run out of the fire department. And there's a phone number. You can just look it up online. Just Google Oakland Macro. And that's a place to call. It's mostly for folks who are having, if you see someone who's having a mental health crisis or someone who is needing assistance that is it's a non-police response. So that is another option of who to call to see if and they are connected to the shelter systems and can help get someone inside if there's someone who's wanting to get outside. Thanks, James.
Okay, and then the last question we have, just I think this might be more for Tamika Moss. Someone was wondering the steps she took to start her organization, All Home. Yeah, I think perhaps contacting her office would be a good idea. One-on-one with her. But we are at time. So I'm gonna pass it off to our Chief Program Officer, Reverend Sophia DeWitt, to get us into gear. What should we be doing next, Sophia?
Thanks, Ronnie. Just really quickly, you know that it's an info event because we always have a call to action at the end. So our call to action today has a couple parts. One is to support All Homes Regional Action Plan, which focuses on expanding 3 solutions all at once, as Ken talked about, the targeted homeless prevention, permanent housing, and interim housing, while also strengthening planning and coordination among local governments, service providers, and other stakeholders. And there's the All Home web address where you can express your support and endorsement. And then for very targeted, direct local actions for folks currently experiencing houselessness, we'd love for you to consider supporting Love and Justice in the Streets with a financial donation if you're able, or if not, with a labor donation or a donation of concrete items that can be given to folks in need. Every financial donation made to Love and Justice Rapid Response Fund is used to directly resource unhoused individuals or curbside communities. And there you can see the web address, and there's also a Venmo square that you can use with your phone to donate directly. Thanks so much, everyone. And, oh, I should also say, as part of call to action, just a reminder to keep up with us. There are various social handles, and just another plug to consider becoming or renewing either your individual membership or your organizational membership for the upcoming year, 2025. We need your support and engagement. And our next Lunch and Learn will be in December. Goodbye 2024 and hello 2025 on December 19th, again at 1 o'clock.
All right, thank you all so much. This was such a great hour. I hope that you felt like it was worth your time and you got your questions answered. But yeah, please enjoy the rest of your day and take care.